Okay, so get this. Today we're diving into, I mean, this is a real head scratcher.
Oh, yeah.
The kind of mystery that makes you question everything, like everything you thought you knew about, well, I guess, fire.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about spontaneous human combustion.
Oh, wow, yeah. Spontaneous human combustion. I mean, it's a concept that's been around for centuries.
Right.
And yet, it remains one of the most hotly debated and perplexing phenomena, I think, in the world of unexplained events.
And, we love to unpack these kind of enigmas.
We do.
Today's deep dive is centered around the baffling case of George Mott. You might have heard of it. Back in 1986, he was found in his Crown Point, New York home.
Okay.
Reduced, entirely to ashes.
Yeah. What makes the Mott case so fascinating and so frustrating, I think, for investigators is that combination of intense localized burning with a complete lack of an obvious ignition source. And it's a pattern that we see again and again in these alleged SHC cases.
Right.
And it's what makes them so difficult to explain using, just conventional fire science.
Okay, so before we go full Sherlock Holmes on this,
right,
let's set the scene a little bit.
Right.
We have eyewitness accounts and official reports to draw from, so you can really get a sense of just how bizarre this all was.
Yeah.
Ready to get into it.
Absolutely. Let's explore the details of this case and see what we can glean from the evidence.
So it's March of 1986. George Mott, a former firefighter, is living alone. He's got some lung issues, relies on an oxygen mask.
Oh, okay.
Which, that adds a whole other layer of complexity to the fire aspect of this.
Sure.
His son, Kendall, hadn't been able to reach him for a couple of days, so he goes over to check on him.
Right.
And what Kendall encounters when he arrives at his father's house is, the first in a series of truly unsettling discoveries, I would say.
Oh, really?
He finds the doorknob is hot to the touch, and when he looks through the window, he sees this thick, dark haze inside, but no visible flames. There's also this strange, sweet odor in the air.
That would definitely, that would set off some alarm bells for me. I can't imagine the mix of fear and confusion running through his mind.
Totally.
At that point.
Right.
It's like something straight out of a mystery novel.
Yeah.
Right. So Kendall, he rushes next door to borrow a flashlight.
Smart.
And he and the neighbor cautiously enter the house, bracing themselves for whatever they might find.
And what they find is a scene of utter devastation. But a very, very specific, very strange kind of devastation. Paint me a picture of what they encountered inside.
Well, it's a scene of contrasts. There are melted pill bottles on the nightstand, yet cassette tapes nearby are completely intact. In the kitchen, they find hot dogs that have been cooked through, sitting in a refrigerator that is totally undamaged.
Right.
And this pattern of localized burning, intense heat in one area, but seemingly unaffected objects right next to it. This is a hallmark of these alleged SHC cases.
Okay, so far, so incredibly weird.
Yeah.
But then they make the most horrifying discovery of all, right?
Yeah. Yes, unfortunately. They find George Mott's remains in his bed, but not in any way anyone could have anticipated. He's been almost entirely reduced to ashes. All that's left is a foot and a fragment of his skull. We're talking about a 180-pound man reduced to just 3 pounds of ash.
It's almost impossible to wrap your head around, that level of destruction happening, so intensely, but in such a confined area.
It's precisely this discrepancy that baffled the investigators. The heat required to cremate a human body is immense, typically achieved, in specialized crematoriums. Yet here we have a case where that level of incineration occurred within a residential home with minimal damage to the surrounding structure. It simply doesn't make sense according to our understanding of how fire behaves.
I bet the official investigation must have been intense. What did they find? Or rather, what didn't they find?
That's just it. They didn't find much of anything that could explain what happened. There were no signs of electrical faults, no gas leaks, no evidence of accelerants, no candles, no cigarettes, nothing that could have sparked a fire of this magnitude. There was no sign of forced entry, no indication of foul play. It was as if the fire had simply materialized out of thin air.
So, a total dead end for the investigators. I imagine that must have been incredibly frustrating for them, especially given the, unusual nature of the case.
Exactly. After an extensive investigation, the official conclusion was accidental death. Case closed. But for some, that explanation just wasn't enough.
Especially for those who knew George Mott personally.
Yes, and that brings us to Tony Moret, a fire inspector who had known George Mott and was deeply troubled by the lack of a definitive answer. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, that there had to be more to the story.
So what did he do? Did he just accept the official explanation and move on? I have a feeling that's not how the story goes.
Not at all. Mott was driven by a need to understand what had truly happened to his friend. He spent hundreds of hours poring over the case files, revisiting the scene, interviewing witnesses, chasing down every possible lead. But despite his best efforts, he kept hitting dead ends. The conventional explanations just didn't fit the evidence.
This is where it gets really interesting, right? Because when the traditional methods fail, you have to start thinking outside the box, exploring possibilities that might seem, well, a little unconventional.
Exactly, and that's precisely what Mott did. Frustrated with the lack of progress, he reached out to an organization called Parascience International, a group that specializes in investigating unusual fire phenomena.
Okay, now we're talking. Parascience International. That sounds like a group that's not afraid to delve into the unknown, to explore the fringes of what's considered scientifically acceptable.
You could say that. They're a team of researchers, investigators, and scientists who are dedicated to studying those cases that fall outside the realm of conventional explanations. Think of them as a bridge between, rigorous scientific inquiry and the exploration of unexplained phenomena.
I love it. And who from Parascience International took on the Mott case? I have a feeling this is where our deep dive takes a turn into even more mysterious territory.
You're right about that. The investigator who picked up the case was Larry Arnold, a man with a rather intriguing double life. By day, he drove a school bus, and by night, he delved into the world of paranormal investigation.
Wait, a school bus driver and a paranormal investigator? That's an unexpected combination. I'm already intrigued. What drew him to the Mott case specifically?
Arnold had spent years researching cases similar to George Mott's cases with those same baffling characteristics. Intense localized burning, absence of a clear ignition source, and victims often reduced entirely to ashes. In fact, he had amassed a collection of over 200 such cases spanning centuries, which he believed pointed to a phenomenon known as spontaneous human combustion.
Wow, 200 cases. That's a pretty compelling body of evidence, even if it's not the kind of evidence that's going to win over mainstream science just yet. What are some of the other cases that Arnold had researched? Were they all as perplexing as the Mott case?
Oh, absolutely. Many of them share those eerie similarities with the Mott case.
Yeah.
Take, for instance, the case of the Parisian innkeeper's wife back in 1725. She was found reduced to ashes in her bedroom, yet wooden utensils sitting on a table nearby were completely untouched by the fire. It's that same pattern of intense, localized burning that just defies conventional explanations.
It's almost as if the fire had like a specific target, and once that target was consumed, it simply ceased to exist. Yeah.
Exactly. And then there's the case from 1951 in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Okay.
A woman was found incinerated in her apartment, but the newspapers she had been reading just moments before were found beside her completely unburnt. These cases, separated by centuries and continents, all share those common threads. The sweet, smoky smell at the scene, the ashy residue, the intense heat concentrated on the victim, and the baffling lack of an obvious ignition source.
It's enough to make you wonder if there's some, hidden force at work.
Yeah.
Something that operates outside the bounds of our current scientific understanding.
It's a question that has plagued researchers and fueled countless theories for generations. Could there be some unknown property of the human body itself that makes these individuals susceptible to such intense self-contained combustion?
I'm ready to dive into the theories.
Okay.
But before we get into the more, shall we say, fringe ideas, let's talk about the conventional explanations. I know you mentioned the wick effect earlier. Mm-hmm. Can you break that down for us a little bit? How could something as seemingly simple as a dropped cigarette or a stray spark lead to the kind of devastation we've been discussing?
Sure. The wick effect is a popular theory among, those who are skeptical of the idea of spontaneous human combustion. It suggests that an external ignition source, like a cigarette, a spark from a fireplace, or even a faulty electrical appliance, could ignite a person's clothing or nearby flammable materials. The body fat, particularly subcutaneous fat, then acts like a candle wick, slowly burning and fueling the fire for an extended period.
So the human body essentially becomes like a giant, slow-burning candle. It's a gruesome thought, but I can see how it could explain the localized burning and the extended duration of some of these fires.
Precisely. The wick effect also accounts for the greasy residue often found at the scene, which some might misinterpret as evidence of an internal combustion process. It's simply the byproduct of burning fat.
Okay, but what about cases like George Mott's, where investigators couldn't find any trace of an external ignition source?
Right.
How does the wick effect explain that?
That's where the wick effect, kind of starts to fall apart for many people. Proponents of SHC argue that if it were simply a matter of an external source igniting clothing or furniture, then we'd see more widespread damage to the surrounding environment. The fires in these alleged SHC cases are incredibly intense, hot enough to incinerate bone, yet they often leave nearby objects completely unscathed.
So if the wick effect doesn't fully explain the phenomenon, what are some of the other theories that have been proposed? I'm ready to get into the more, shall we say, unconventional explanations.
Well, Larry Arnott, an investigator from Parascience International, believed that amplified bioelectricity might be the trigger. He theorized that under certain conditions, the body's natural electrical impulses could somehow become amplified to the point of sparking a sudden and intense internal combustion.
Okay, now that's a concept I need you to unpack a bit. We all know our bodies, use electrical impulses for everything from, muscle movement to brain function. But how could those, tiny electrical signals suddenly become powerful enough to ignite a fire within the body?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Arnold's theory, while intriguing, lacks a clear scientific mechanism. Our understanding of bioelectricity simply doesn't support the idea that it could generate the kind of heat required to cause spontaneous combustion.
So where does that leave us? We have a phenomenon that defies conventional explanations, and the theories we have explored so far seem to, fall short. Are there any other avenues of investigation worth exploring?
There are a few other possibilities that have been floated over the years, though they remain largely speculative. Some researchers have proposed that unusual chemical reactions within the body, perhaps triggered by external factors like stress or even certain medications, could create conditions conducive to spontaneous combustion. Others have suggested that a buildup of static electricity within the body under, very specific atmospheric conditions could potentially spark a sudden and intense discharge.
So we're talking about a perfect storm of internal and external factors that, under just the right circumstances, could lead to these seemingly impossible events.
Exactly. It's important to remember that we're still learning so much about the human body and its capabilities. There may be processes at work that we simply haven't identified or fully comprehended yet.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? That despite all our scientific advancements, there are still mysteries out there that challenge our understanding of, the world and ourselves.
Absolutely, and that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating. They push us to the edge of our knowledge and force us to confront the possibility that there's still so much we don't know.
It's a good reminder to stay curious, to keep asking questions, and to be open to the possibility that even in the 21st century, we haven't uncovered all the secrets of the universe.
Well said. Now, while the debate over spontaneous human combustion, rages on, and scientists continue to search for a definitive explanation, there's another case I'd like to bring to your attention. It might seem unrelated at first glance, but I think it highlights the importance of considering multiple perspectives when faced with the unknown.
I'm always up for a good mystery.
Okay.
Especially one that challenges our assumptions. Tell me more.
This case takes us to the Navajo Nation in the Four Corners region of the United States. Back in 1993, a terrifying outbreak swept through the reservation, leaving health officials baffled and communities gripped by fear. It all started with a young woman named Florina Woody, a healthy 21-year-old mother who suddenly fell ill and died within days. The symptoms were perplexing rapid respiratory failure, fluid-filled lungs, and just this terrifyingly fast decline.
Those symptoms sound, they sound eerily similar to some of the accounts we've heard about alleged SHC victims.
Huh.
The sudden onset, the respiratory distress, the lack of an obvious cause. It's a chilling parallel.
You're right to notice this connection, and just like in those cases, the doctors were initially stumped. They ran tests, checked for known diseases, but nothing seemed to fit. Meanwhile, the outbreak continued to spread, claiming the lives of more young, seemingly healthy individuals. Panic spread through the Navajo Nation as people desperately sought answers.
It must have been a terrifying time for everyone involved. Did the CDC get involved in trying to, contain the outbreak?
Absolutely. The CDC descended on the reservation armed with, their high-tech equipment and scientific methods, determined to identify the cause of the outbreak and stop it in its tracks. However, they encountered a significant obstacle. There was a deep distrust of Western medicine among many members of the Navajo Nation, stemming from, a long history of cultural misunderstanding and mistreatment.
That's a crucial point. When dealing with, a health crisis, especially within a community with its own unique cultural beliefs and practices, it's essential to approach the situation with sensitivity and respect. Did the CDC acknowledge and address these cultural concerns?
To their credit, some of the CDC researchers recognized the importance of bridging that cultural divide. They began working alongside Navajo representatives, seeking to understand their perspective on the outbreak, and that's when things took an unexpected turn.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What happened? Did the Navajo community, offer any insights that the CDC hadn't considered?
The Navajo medicine men, who held a position of, deep respect and authority within the community, stepped forward with a chilling warning. They pointed to a creature from Navajo legend, a creature known as the Naye, or Nashe Yazi, which is often associated with both life and death. They believed that this creature was somehow connected to the outbreak.
Wait a minute, are we talking about a supernatural creature? Did the CDC take this claim seriously? I can imagine that, a group of scientists might be hesitant to consider a mythological explanation for a deadly disease outbreak.
You're right. It was a clash of worldviews, of different ways of knowing and understanding the world. But the severity of the outbreak and the trust that the Navajo community placed in their medicine men, forced the CDC researchers to consider the possibility that there might be more to this story than they initially realized.
But what do? Did they, embark on a hunt for a mythical creature?
Not exactly. They took a more pragmatic approach, focusing on the creature that the medicine men had identified, and what they discovered was both surprising and, in a way, strangely fitting. The creature that the Navajo medicine men had warned about was none other than the humble deer mouse.
Okay.
And the culprit behind the deadly outbreak.
Right.
A previously unknown strain of hantavirus.
The deer mouse. That's incredible. It's a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous threats can come from the most, unassuming sources. But how did the medicine men know? Did they have some, ancient knowledge of hantavirus?
That's a great question, and one that anthropologists and medical historians continue to debate. It's unclear whether their knowledge stemmed from centuries of observation and ecological understanding, or from a deeper, more, spiritual connection to the natural world. But what's certain is that their insights proved invaluable in solving the mystery and bringing an end to the outbreak.
It's a powerful example of how different ways of knowing, different approaches to understanding the world can complement each other. In this case, the CDC's scientific methods and the Navajo community's traditional knowledge work together to solve, a life or death mystery.
Exactly. And it highlights the importance of cultural sensitivity and open-mindedness when investigating these kinds of phenomena. Sometimes the answers we seek lie outside the boundaries of our current scientific paradigms.
This whole deep dive has been a whirlwind of information and, mind-bending possibilities. We've gone from the perplexing case of George Mott to centuries-old accounts of spontaneous human combustion, explored the scientific and the unconventional, and now we've landed on a story that bridges the gap between modern medicine and ancient wisdom.
And I think it's a fitting reminder that the search for truth is often, a winding path.
Totally.
It's about being willing to embrace uncertainty, to consider multiple perspectives, and to remain open to the possibility that there's still so much we don't know about the world and ourselves.
Well said. But before we wrap up our exploration of spontaneous human combustion and the mysteries it represents, I have one more thought-provoking question for you. If we entertain, for just a moment, the idea that spontaneous human combustion might be a real phenomenon, what does that tell us about, the nature of reality itself? Are there forces at work in the universe that we simply haven't been able to measure or explain with our current, scientific tools?
That's the question that lingers in the back of my mind after exploring all these cases. Is it possible that our understanding of the human body, of physics, of the very fabric of reality is incomplete? Perhaps there are aspects of our existence that remain hidden from view, waiting to be discovered.
It's a thought that's both exhilarating and a little bit unsettling, isn't it? To think that despite all of our advancements, we're still just, scratching the surface of what's truly possible.
Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of mysteries like spontaneous human combustion. They force us to confront the limits of our knowledge, to acknowledge that there are still questions we can't answer, phenomena we can't fully explain.
It's a humbling reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is an ongoing journey, and that sometimes the most valuable discoveries come from, venturing into the unknown, from embracing the possibility that our current understanding of the world might be incomplete.
Well said, and I think it's that sense of wonder, that willingness to question and explore that ultimately drives us forward, pushing us to expand the boundaries of human knowledge and understanding.
It's like we're all explorers setting sail into, uncharted waters, not knowing what we might find, but driven by that insatiable desire to discover what lies beyond the horizon.
Exactly. And who knows what wonders await us out there, just beyond the reach of our current understanding.
Right.
Perhaps one day we'll unlock the secrets of spontaneous human combustion. And in doing so, we'll uncover new truths about the universe and our place within it.
I love that perspective. So as we wrap up our deep dive into this perplexing phenomenon, let's leave our listeners with a final thought to ponder. What do you think, dear listener? Could spontaneous human combustion be a real phenomenon? Or is there a more rational scientific explanation waiting to be discovered? We encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep that spark of curiosity alive.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll be the one to unlock the secrets of this enduring mystery.
Until next time, stay curious.